She thought because she drove a white BMW X5 and ran the HOA for the new Lakeside Meadows monstrosity next door, she owned my land. She was about to learn that in Texas, the deed is king. I spent $52,000 on concrete, money I had earmarked for a new breeding bull, just to watch her meticulously constructed life of lies fall apart. And honestly, it was worth every single penny. My name is Jake Mercer, and my family has owned Willow Creek Ranch since my granddaddy came back from the war in 1945. It's not the biggest spread in the county, just 50 acres, but it's ours. It's 50 acres of rolling pasture, a thick stand of oak trees that have been here longer than Texas has been a state, and the crown jewel, Willow Creek Lake. It's a 5-acre, spring-fed body of water, clear and cool, entirely contained within the boundaries of my property. For 75 years, that lake has been where my family swam, fished, and watched the sun go down. It's where my prize-winning Angus herd drinks, their black hides stark against the blue water. My granddaddy built a sturdy wooden dock on the north shore, and I've replaced every board on it at least twice myself. That dock, that water, that land, it's more than just property. It's my history. It's my soul. The piece started to crack about a year ago. A developer bought the fallow farmland adjacent to my eastern fence line. Soon, the sound of birdsong was replaced by the groan of bulldozers and the shriek of power saws. They were building a high-end housing development, one of those places with 0 lot lines, beige stucco walls, and a homeowners association with a rule book thicker than a phone book. They called it Lakeside Meadows. The name itself was a lie. The only meadow was the one they'd paved over, and the only lake was mine. The first time I met Cynthia Bradshaw, she was standing at my fence line, talking on her phone so loud I could hear her from my barn 100 yards away. She was poured into a business suit that looked all wrong for the country, with heels that were sinking into the soft dirt. Her white BMW was parked haphazardly, half on the gravel of my private access road. This was the road my granddaddy had cut, the one that led from the main county road past my house and down to the lake. It was, and always had been, part of my deeded land. I walked over, dusting my hands on my jeans. I'm not an unfriendly man. I believe in being a good neighbor, right up until the point someone gives me a reason not to be. "Ma'am," I said, tipping my hat, "can I help you with something?" She held up a manicured finger, signaling for me to wait while she finished her call. "No, Chad, the comps are solid. We're marketing it as an exclusive, lake access community. It's our primary value add." She snapped her phone shut and finally turned her eyes on me. They were cold, assessing. "You must be the farmer," she said, not as a question, but as a classification. "I'm Jake Mercer. This is my ranch," I corrected, keeping my voice even. "Cynthia Bradshaw," she announced, as if I should already know the name. "I'm the developer for Lakeside Meadows, and the acting HOA president, of course." She gestured vaguely toward my lake. "We are just so thrilled to have this gorgeous natural amenity right next door. My clients are going to love it." A little warning bell went off in my head. "Well, I'm sure they'll enjoy the view. My fence line is clearly marked, but you might want to remind your residents that this is a working ranch, active livestock." She gave a tinkling, artificial laugh. "Oh, don't you worry about that. We're all going to be one big, happy community." She looked down at my dusty boots and then back at my face. "Bless your heart," she said, the quintessential Southern insult wrapped in a sugary coating. That was the first time she said it. It would not be the last. She then got in her pristine BMW and tore off, spitting gravel from my own road onto my boots. That was the beginning of Act 1, the invasion. A week later, I was mending a fence down by the south pasture when I saw it. Cynthia Bradshaw, with a couple in tow, walking right down the middle of my access road, heading for the lake. She was gesturing expansively, her voice carrying on the breeze. And as you can see, you have direct access to the water for kayaking and fishing. The HOA will be formalizing the pathway and adding a community picnic area. I got in my old Ford F-250 and drove up to meet them. I didn't speed, didn't honk. I just pulled up and blocked their path. I got out, my shadow falling over them. The couple looked uncomfortable. Cynthia looked annoyed. "Jake, what a coincidence," she said, her smile as fake as a $3 bill. "I was just showing the Hamiltons the community's beautiful lake." "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and hard. I looked at the Hamiltons, then back at her. "This is not the community's lake. This is my lake. This is my road. You are trespassing on private property." The husband, a pale man in brand new hiking boots, looked at Cynthia. "You said this was part of the development's amenities." Cynthia's eyes flashed with anger, but she kept her voice syrupy. "It is. There's just a little local paperwork to sort out. An easement agreement. Jake here is just a bit old-fashioned." She turned to me. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we're conducting business." "Your business ends at my fence line," I stated flatly. "This is your first and only warning. Do not bring anyone else down this road again. It's not safe. We move cattle through here." I pointed to the large, hand-painted sign nailed to a post not 10 feet away. It read, "Private property, Willow Creek Ranch. No trespassing." She scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. This is clearly an access road." "It's my driveway, ma'am." I didn't budge. After a tense moment, she huffed, turned on her heel, and marched her bewildered clients back toward the construction site. I watched them go, the knot in my stomach tightening. This wasn't going to be a simple misunderstanding. This was a deliberate encroachment. The next Saturday, I found the heavy-duty padlock on the main gate, where my road meets the county road, cut clean through with bolt cutters. The gate was wide open. Tire tracks from her BMW were pressed into the dirt, heading down toward the lake. I spent the rest of the morning welding a new clasp onto the gate and putting on a chain and lock so thick it would take a cutting torch to get through. I also added 3 more no trespassing signs, including one that read, "Private road, not a community easement." I thought, foolishly, that this might get the message across. My wife Sarah saw the grim look on my face when I came in for lunch. She's a high school science teacher, smart and steady, the anchor that keeps my temper from running away with me. "The new neighbor again?" she asked, placing a sandwich in front of me. "She cut the lock," I said, my voice tight. "Just brazen as you please." Sarah sighed, her brow furrowing with worry. "Jake, be careful. People like that, they think rules are for other people. They have lawyers on retainer." "So do I grumbled. "And I have a deed. In Texas, that's supposed to mean something." The situation reached its boiling point 2 weeks later. It was a hot July afternoon, and I was moving a portion of my herd, including 5 pregnant heifers, from the north pasture to the south one, which required them to cross the access road near the lake. It's a slow, careful process. You don't rush 1,000 pounds of nervous, expectant mother. We were halfway across the road, a river of black hides moving peacefully, when I heard it. the high-pitched whine of an engine being pushed too hard. Cynthia Bradshaw's white BMW X5 came flying over the rise in the road, doing at least 50. She saw the cows, and instead of slowing down, she laid on the horn. A long, sustained, infuriating blast. The herd panicked. Cattle are prey animals. A sudden, loud noise spells danger. They scattered, running in every direction. Cows that had been plodding along peacefully were now a stampeding, terrified mass. I saw one of the pregnant heifers, my best one, Bessie, get knocked sideways by another panicked animal. She went down hard, her leg buckling underneath her. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash!" Cynthia screamed this out her window as she swerved around the edge of the chaos, her tires churning up my pasture. She didn't even slow down. She just kept going, speeding toward the lake as if my livelihood, my animals, were nothing more than an inconvenience. Rage, cold and pure, washed over me. I ignored the rest of the herd and ran to Bessie. She was struggling to get up, her eyes wide with pain and fear. Her right foreleg was bent at an unnatural angle. It was broken. And worse, I could see the telltale signs of distress that meant she was going into premature labor. A prize-winning Angus, a bloodline I'd spent a decade cultivating, potentially ruined. A calf that would be lucky to survive. All because this woman in her shiny German SUV was in a hurry to sell a lie. I got Bessie stabilized as best I could and called my vet, my hands shaking with fury. He said he'd be there as fast as he could. After I got off the phone, I walked to the edge of the lake. Cynthia was there with another prospective buyer, gesturing at my dock. My dock. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I walked, each step deliberate and heavy. She saw me coming, and her face hardened. The buyer looked from me to her, sensing the tension. "What do you want now, Mercer?" she snapped. "I'm with a client." My voice came out flat, devoid of all emotion. "You just broke the leg of one of my pregnant heifers. You caused a stampede. You could have killed her." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it's a cow. Send me a bill. Now get off this part of the property. It's upsetting my clients." "This is all my property," I said, the words like chips of ice. I looked her dead in the eye. "This is over. This was your last chance. There will be no more warnings. You will not set foot on my land again. Ever." "You can't tell me what to do," she shrieked, her fake composure finally cracking. "I have buyers to think about. My lawyer will bury you in paperwork." "You do that," I said. I turned and walked away, back toward my injured animal. The image of her snarling face burned into my mind. I had been polite. I had been neighborly. I had followed the law. Now, the gloves were off. She had declared war on my family's legacy, and I was going to finish it. That night, after the vet had come and gone, the news wasn't good. Bessie would probably survive, but her leg would never be right. She'd walk with a limp for the rest of her life. Her competition days were over. The calf was born premature, and its chances were 50-50 at best. The financial loss was significant, but it was the violation that truly ate at me. Sarah sat with me on the porch, holding my hand. She didn't say anything for a long time, just watched the fireflies blink over the pasture. Finally, she looked at my face in the twilight. "You're planning something," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. It's the same look your grandfather got when the bank tried to foreclose on him during the drought of '56. She squeezed my hand. Good. That was all I needed. The invasion was over. The paper war was about to begin. The very next morning, I started Act 2. I took the bolt cutters she'd left behind, the time-stamped photo of her cut lock, and my vet's preliminary report on Bessie's injuries down to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Brody is a good man, but he's cautious. He took my report for criminal mischief and animal cruelty, but he warned me it was my word against hers unless I had more. She'll just say the cow ran into her, Jake. You need undeniable proof. That's when I decided to become a security expert. I spent $1,000 on high-definition, motion-activated trail cams. I placed them strategically, one watching the main gate, 2 along the access road, one with a perfect view of the dock, and another watching the fence line where she liked to cut across. I was building a case, brick by digital brick. Sure enough, 2 days later, my phone pinged with an alert. I pulled up the feed. It was Cynthia Bradshaw, back at the main gate. This time, she had a cordless angle grinder. Sparks flew as she cut through the half-inch hardened steel chain I'd installed. The camera captured it all in glorious 1080p. Her face contorted in a grimace of effort. The brand name on the grinder, the license plate of her BMW. She then drove down to the lake, met another couple, and gave her usual fraudulent tour. I saved the video file, labeling it trespass_and_destruction_of_property_01. Over the next 3 weeks, I collected 17 more just like it. Then came the lawsuit. A process server showed up at my door and handed me a thick envelope. Cynthia was suing me. She was petitioning the court to grant a prescriptive easement, claiming the road had been used for public access for years, and demanding I remove my illegal gate and pay her damages for tortious interference with her business. It was audacious. It was a complete fabrication. But it was official, and now I had to fight it in court. My lawyer, a sharp old country attorney named Ben Carter, read the filing and chuckled. Jake, this woman is either dumber than a bag of hammers, or she thinks you are. A prescriptive easement requires open, notorious, and hostile use for a statutory period, which is 10 years in Texas. Has this road been a public thoroughfare for the last decade? Hell no, I snorted. It's been locked or gated for the last 75 years. The only people who use it are me, my family, and the occasional ranch hand or vet. And the mailman, I suppose. Then she's got nothing, Ben said. But to kill this thing dead, we need to go on the offensive. We need to pull every deed, every survey, every plat map related to your property and the adjoining one, all the way back to the original sovereign grant. We need to build a paper fortress so thick her high-priced city lawyer can't find a crack to crawl through. So, we went to war in the musty archives of the county clerk's office. For 3 solid days, we were hunched over massive, brittle books and scrolling through grainy microfilm. We smelled like old paper and dust. We traced the ownership of my 50 acres back to a grant given to a Texas Ranger in the 1880s. We saw it sectioned off and sold in 1945 to my grandfather, John Mercer. We unrolled the original survey map, a beautiful piece of hand-drawn cartography. There it was, clear as day, the 50-acre tract, with the access road drawn squarely inside its boundaries, labeled Private Lane. There was no mention of any easement, granted or implied. Then we pulled the records for the adjacent property, the one Cynthia was developing. It had been a single 200-acre parcel of farmland for a century. The deeds for it made specific reference to its boundary being the eastern fence line of the Mercer property. There was no mention of any right to cross that line. In fact, we found a document from the 1960s where the previous owner of that land had formally requested permission from my grandfather to use the road temporarily to move some heavy equipment, a request my grandfather had granted in a signed temporary license. It was the smoking gun. It proved that even the prior owners knew the road was private and access was permissive, not a right. Ben slapped the dusty ledger book shut. "We've got her," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "This isn't just a defense, Jake. This is ammunition." While we were digging through the past, Cynthia was escalating in the present. She filed a complaint with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the TCEQ. An inspector, a young guy named Peterson who looked exhausted by life, showed up at my ranch. He held a clipboard and had a grim expression. "Mr. Mercer, we've received a complaint," he began, "alleging that runoff from your cattle operation is contaminating Willow Creek Lake, and that you're allowing the animals to degrade the shoreline, causing significant environmental impact." I just nodded. "I've been expecting you. The complaint was filed by a Ms. Cynthia Bradshaw, wasn't it?" Peterson looked surprised. "That's confidential information." "Not when she screams it on the phone next to my fence line," I said. "Come on, let me give you the tour. Put on your boots, though. We're going off-road." I didn't just show him the lake. I started by showing him my rotational grazing plan, which keeps any one pasture from being overused. I showed him the solar-powered well and the water troughs I'd installed in the upper pastures to encourage the herd to drink away from the lake. Then I took him down to the shoreline. Instead of a muddy, eroded mess, he saw a healthy, vegetated buffer zone. I had fenced the cattle back 20 feet from the water's edge along most of the lake, allowing them access only at a single, specific point with a gravel bed to prevent muddiness. "This is a water management plan I worked out with the NRCS 5 years ago," I explained, handing him a folder with the official paperwork. "We test the water quarterly. Here are the results for the last 2 years. As you can see, the coliform counts are well below the threshold for recreational water." He looked at my paperwork, then at the pristine shoreline, then back at me. "Mr. Mercer, this is a model setup. This is what we try to get ranchers to do." "I know," I said. "Now let me show you the real environmental threat." I pulled out my phone and showed him the video of Cynthia's BMW tearing up the pasture near the lake, spinning its wheels and leaving deep ruts in the soil right next to the water. "That, Mr. Peterson, is where your erosion is coming from." He watched the video, his expression hardening. He handed me back my phone. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Mercer. I think I have everything I need. You won't be hearing from the TCEQ about this again." He left, and I knew I'd won that battle. 2 days later, a similar visit from the county health department regarding unsanitary conditions ended the same way. She was firing blanks, but she was wasting my time and trying to bleed me with 1,000 paper cuts. Her next move was to the media. She went on the local evening news, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She painted a picture of a heartless cattle baron, a grumpy old recluse, denying the hard-working families of his new community access to a beautiful lake that should be for everyone. "He's putting up fences, locking gates," she cried to the reporter. "The children of Lakeside Meadows just want a place to swim, and this man is hoarding a natural resource all for himself." They showed a picture of my new, formidable gate, making it look like the entrance to a prison. They didn't mention it was my private driveway. The phone started ringing. Some were angry calls from people who'd seen the news. A few were even threats. It was a smear campaign, and it was working. People in town who had known me for years were looking at me sideways. This was her trying to win in the court of public opinion what she knew she couldn't win in a court of law. This is when my quiet, unassuming secret weapon was deployed. Eddie the mailman. Eddie has been delivering mail on this route for 30 years. He knows everyone and everything. He's a quiet observer of life, and he has a strong sense of justice. He'd seen Cynthia's antics firsthand. He'd seen her cutting my locks and screaming at me. One afternoon, he lingered after handing me my mail. He was a small, wiry man with a perpetually worried expression. "Jake," he said, lowering his voice and leaning over the fence of my porch, "that Bradshaw woman. You gotta be careful." "I know, Eddie. She's a piece of work." "No, it's more than that," he insisted. He glanced around as if spies were lurking in the azaleas. "She's desperate. I see her mail. Not reading it, mind you, just the return addresses. Final notice from the bank. Letters from a law firm that specializes in high-asset divorce. She's leveraged up to her eyeballs on this development. She took out a massive bridge loan, and it's coming due." This was interesting. I leaned in closer. "Go on." "She's been on the phone every time I come by, yelling at someone. The other day, I heard her clear as a bell. She was talking to her lawyer, I think, screaming that the sales contracts were ironclad. I heard her say the words, 'guaranteed deeded lake and dock access.' She's not just promising it on her tours, Jake." He leaned in so close, I could smell the Old Spice on his uniform. "She's writing it into the legal sales contracts. She's selling your road and your lake as if they're assets she owns." And that was it. That was the moment the entire game changed. It clicked into place with the force of a tectonic plate shifting. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. This wasn't a dispute over an easement. This was fraud. Criminal, provable, go-to-jail fraud. She was selling a product she didn't own, couldn't deliver, and had no right to. Her entire financial house of cards was built on a foundation of my private property. If I could prove she couldn't deliver that deeded access, every one of those sales contracts would be null and void. She wouldn't just lose her lawsuit against me, she'd be facing bankruptcy and a fistful of felonies. I stood there, the mail still in my hand, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. She had overplayed her hand so spectacularly, so arrogantly, that she had given me the very weapon I needed to destroy her. She thought she was fighting a war over a dirt road. She was about to find out she had bet her entire future on it, and the house was about to call in the debt. That evening, I sat on my porch with a legal pad and a glass of iced tea. Sarah came and sat with me. "That look is back," she said. "Eddie the mailman is a national treasure," I said, and proceeded to tell her everything. When I was finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So she's a con artist," Sarah said, her voice hard. "She's not just a bully, she's a criminal." "That's the long and short of it," I agreed. "Her lawsuit is a smokescreen. She's trying to bully the court into giving her what she's already illegally sold." "So what's your plan?" she asked. "You have the proof from the county clerk. You have the videos. You have Eddie's information." I looked out at the access road, a dusty scar running through my green pasture. I pictured her white BMW barreling down it. I pictured her cutting my locks, her face a mask of entitlement. A simple legal victory wasn't enough anymore. She had endangered my animals, slandered my name, and tried to steal my heritage. She needed a lesson, a permanent one, a physical, unmovable, and deeply personal statement. "I'm going to let her sell a few more houses," I said slowly, the idea taking shape. "I'm going to let her dig her hole a little deeper. I'm going to let her sign a few more fraudulent contracts. And then I took a deep breath. I'm going to build a wall. Sarah stared at me. A wall? A big one. A permanent one. Right where the gate is now. A 12-foot tall, steel-reinforced concrete wall. The vision was suddenly crystal clear in my mind. She's selling access to something she can't deliver. I'm going to make it physically impossible for her to even pretend she can. I'm going to turn her primary value add into a concrete monument to her own stupidity. This, right here, was the turning point. This was the moment I stopped playing defense and started planning the final, decisive attack. The legal battle was just one front. The real victory would be louder, more visceral. If you've ever dealt with an HOA or a neighbor who thinks your property line is just a suggestion, you know the frustration. You know that sometimes just being right isn't enough. You need to be decisively, overwhelmingly, and visibly right. If you're enjoying this story of concrete justice, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more. Now, let's get back to building a wall. The next day, I made a phone call. Not to my lawyer, but to a man known locally only as Big Mike. Big Mike ran a construction and excavation company. He was a giant of a man with hands like cinder blocks and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He chewed tobacco, hated HOAs, and believed that a man's property was sacred. He was, in short, the perfect man for the job. I met him at the site of the future wall, my main gate. I laid out the whole story, the trespassing, the injured heifer, the lawsuit, the fraud. I showed him the survey map and my deed. He listened intently, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dust every so often. When I finished, he was quiet for a long minute, just staring at the gate she kept cutting. "So this city lady," he said, the words dripping with disdain, "thinks she can just sell your road?" "That's the gist of it," I confirmed. "And you want to block it off. For good." "I want to build a statement," I said. 12 feet high, steel rebar, deep footers. I want something a tank would have second thoughts about. A slow grin spread across Big Mike's rugged face. It was a terrifying sight. "An agricultural security barrier," he rumbled. "That's the permit we'll file for protection of livestock and prevention of unauthorized vehicular access to sensitive agricultural areas. It's 100% legal on AG-zoned land. The county can't say boo about it." He slapped me on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of me. I hate people like her. "It'll be a pleasure, Jake. When do you want to start?" This was the crucial part of the plan. "She's having a big, grand opening sales event for Lakeside Meadows in 3 weeks," I said. "On a Saturday. I want the wall to be finished by Friday evening." Big Mike's grin widened. "Oh, that's beautiful. That's poetry right there." He spat again. "All right. We'll need to do the excavation for the footers first, then frame it up and pour. It'll take about a week, give or take. We'll start the Monday before her party." He quoted me a price, $52,000. It was a staggering amount of money, the cost of a new truck or a prize-winning bull. But as I looked at the broken lock on my gate and thought of Bessie's injury, it felt like a bargain. "I'll pay in cash," I said. The next 3 weeks were a strange, tense waiting game. I continued to collect video evidence. Cynthia, emboldened by her lawsuit and the news story, grew even more brazen. She was bringing entire van loads of potential buyers down my road now. I just watched and saved the files. I let her dig. Every new sold sign that went up in her development was another nail in her coffin. My lawyer, Ben, had filed our response to her suit, including our mountain of evidence, but we requested a continuance, dragging the legal process out to give my construction plan time to unfold. Finally, the Monday of the grand opening week arrived. At 6 a.m., The ground began to shake. Big Mike's convoy arrived, a massive excavator, a backhoe, and 2 dump trucks. They didn't waste a minute. The excavator's bucket tore into the earth where my gate once stood, digging a trench 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep across the entire 20-foot width of the road. It didn't take long for the Queen to notice. Around 8:30 a.m., the white BMW came screaming down the county road and skidded to a halt. Cynthia Bradshaw jumped out, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice echoing across the pasture. Big Mike, who was directing the excavator, turned slowly. He took the wad of tobacco out of his mouth and examined it before flicking it away. "Ma'am, we're doing some construction work here." "On my access road? You have no right. I will have you arrested. Stop this immediately." I chose that moment to walk up, holding a thermos of coffee. "Morning, Cynthia," I said cheerfully. "Nice day for it." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes bulging. You are behind this. You are illegally blocking my road. I am calling the sheriff." "You do that," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "While you're at it, ask him to look at the permit filed last week for an agricultural security barrier on parcel number 7754-A. That's this parcel. My parcel." She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking. 20 minutes later, 2 deputies arrived. They looked at the giant trench, at Big Mike's crew, and at me, calmly leaning against my truck. Cynthia ran to them, launching into a hysterical tirade. "He's destroying my development. He's cut off our only lake access. Arrest him." The senior deputy, a man named Hicks, who I'd known for years, held up a hand to quiet her. He walked over to me. "Jake, what's all this?" I handed him a folder. Inside was a copy of my deed, the survey map highlighting the private road, and the county-stamped permit for the barrier. "Just securing my property, deputy," I said, "protecting my livestock from unauthorized traffic." Hicks read through the documents carefully. He walked over to the edge of the trench and looked at the survey markers. He went back to his car and spoke on the radio for a few minutes. Finally, he walked back over to a vibrating with rage Cynthia. "Ma'am," he said in a tired voice, "the documents appear to be in order. This is private property, and Mr. Mercer has a valid permit for this construction. This is a civil matter. There's nothing we can do." "A civil matter? He is building a wall across my road." "According to these surveys, ma'am," Hicks said, his patience wearing thin, "it's his road." The deputies left. Cynthia stood there, sputtering, as the excavator roared back to life and dumped another bucket full of dirt. She screamed at the workers until she was hoarse, but they ignored her. She screamed at me. I just smiled and waved. The first phase of the execution was a success. For the next 3 days, she was a constant, shrieking presence. She tried to stand in front of the cement mixer. Big Mike threatened to have her arrested for trespassing, and she backed off. She took hundreds of pictures, presumably for her lawyer, who was probably having a meltdown of his own. Meanwhile, the wall rose from the ground. First, a lattice of thick steel rebar was erected in the trench. Then, the wooden forms went up. On Thursday, the concrete trucks arrived. A fleet of them lined up on the county road. For 8 solid hours, they poured thousands of pounds of concrete into the forms. By Friday at noon, the forms came off, and there it stood. It was glorious. 12 feet of solid, unyielding gray concrete. It stretched from a massive oak tree on one side to a new 12-foot steel post sunk in concrete on the other. In the center was a gap, which was soon filled by the final piece, a custom-built, solid steel sliding gate, also 12 feet high, mounted on a heavy-duty track. The whole thing was operated by a commercial-grade motor, with a keypad and remote control that only I possessed. It was less a gate and more of a bank vault door. Big Mike stood back to admire his handiwork, a proud look on his face. "Even a tank ain't getting through this," he said, and I believed him. She's going to have a fit. The grand opening for Lakeside Meadows was scheduled for Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Cynthia had outdone herself. There were balloons, banners, a catered food truck, and a small army of eager real estate agents in matching polo shirts. I saw it all from my front porch. Cars started to arrive, expensive sedans and SUVs filled with well-dressed potential buyers. They would turn off the county road, see the balloons, and head toward what they thought was the entrance. And then they would see it. The wall. It was causing a traffic jam. Cars were stopping, the drivers looking confused. They'd get out, stare at the monolithic slab of concrete blocking their path, and look at the Lakeside Meadows banners on the other side. Cynthia and her agents were running around like decapitated chickens, trying to direct people to an alternate, much longer route that wound through the back of the development and didn't offer any view of the lake. I was watching the whole circus through my binoculars when I saw the white BMW. Cynthia was behind the wheel, and she was not trying to redirect traffic. She was sitting there, about 100 yards from the wall, just staring at it. Her grand opening was turning into a disaster. The exclusive lake access she had sold them was visibly, undeniably, a lie. You could see the desperation coming off her in waves. Then she did something so monumentally stupid, so perfectly in character, that I couldn't have scripted it better. She revved the engine. The BMW shot forward. It picked up speed, hurtling directly toward my brand new solid steel gate. She was going to ram it. She actually thought her 5,000-pound luxury SUV could break through a custom fabricated gate designed to stop a semi-truck. The impact was spectacular. There was a deafening crunch of metal and plastic. The BMW's front end accordioned like a cheap tin can. The hood buckled, the windshield shattered, and both airbags deployed with a violent poof. The gate? It shuddered. It got a scratch in the paint. That was it. The wall didn't move a millimeter. Silence descended, broken only by the hissing of a ruptured radiator. The door of the wrecked BMW creaked open, and Cynthia Bradshaw stumbled out. She had a cut on her forehead from a piece of flying plastic, and her expensive suit was covered in airbag dust. She stared at the insignificant scratch on the gate, then at the mangled remains of her car, and let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. All of her potential buyers, the ones who had been promised a beautiful lakefront lifestyle, stood there in stunned silence, watching her total and complete meltdown. They had a perfect front row seat to the exact moment her web of lies physically collided with reality. And reality had won, decisively. The final act of my revenge didn't take place on my land, but in the sterile, fluorescent-lit chamber of the county town hall. The following Tuesday, there was a scheduled meeting. It was usually a dull affair, but thanks to Cynthia's media campaign and the spectacular failure of her grand opening, the room was packed. The local news cameras were there, hungry for the next chapter in The Rancher Feud. Cynthia was there, of course. She had a bandage on her forehead and a defiant, victimized look on her face. She was on the agenda to make a plea to the council for emergency intervention against my hostile and illegal barrier. Her lawyer, a slick-looking man in a suit that probably cost more than my first truck, sat beside her, shuffling papers nervously. He'd seen my lawyer's filings. He knew what was coming. I was on the agenda too, right after her. She went up to the podium and delivered a tearful, Oscar-worthy performance. She spoke of community, of sharing, of the children who dreamed of swimming in the lake. She painted me as a monster, a cruel land baron who had built a spite wall to terrorize her and her clients. This man, she said, pointing a trembling finger at me, is holding our community hostage. The room was murmuring. Some people looked sympathetic. She had set the stage perfectly for her own downfall. Then it was my turn. I didn't bring a lawyer to the podium. I just brought a laptop and a stack of papers. I connected the laptop to the hall's projector. "Good evening," I said calmly. "My name is Jake Mercer. My family has owned Willow Creek Ranch for 77 years. I'm not here tonight to talk about feelings. I'm here to talk about facts." The first image that flashed up on the big screen behind me was the original 1940 deed for my ranch. I let everyone read it. Then I put up the hand-drawn survey map using the projector's laser pointer to trace the boundaries of my land, clearly showing the road and the entire lake contained within it. "Fact number 1, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "The lake and the road in question are, and always have been, my private property." Next, I projected the county-stamped permit for the agricultural security barrier. "Fact number 2. The structure Miss Bradshaw calls a spite wall is a legally permitted security barrier built to protect my livestock and property from repeated, documented incursions." Then came the video montage. I played a highlight reel from my collection. The first clip was her, clear as day, using an angle grinder on my chain. The next was her leading a tour group past 4 no trespassing signs. Then came the big one, the clip from the day of the stampede. The audience gasped as they saw her white BMW barrel toward my herd, horn blaring. They saw Bessie go down. The room, which had been sympathetic to her a moment ago, was now dead silent, the mood turning against her. These are just a few of more than 40 documented instances of criminal trespassing and destruction of property, I said. But I wasn't finished. I saved the best for last. But simple trespassing is not why we're really here tonight. Ms. Bradshaw hasn't just been breaking the law to take a shortcut. She's been breaking the law to commit fraud. A loud murmur went through the crowd. Cynthia went pale. Her lawyer was visibly sweating. Miss Bradshaw has been funding her entire development by selling something she does not own. I held up a thick document. This is a copy of one of her standard sales contracts for a home in Lakeside Meadows, provided to me by a concerned party. I looked over at Eddie the mailman, who was sitting in the back row, giving me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "I'd like to direct your attention to Addendum B, Community Amenities." I projected the addendum onto the screen. The text was sharp and clear for everyone to see. It read, "Buyer is hereby guaranteed, deeded, permanent access to Willow Creek Lake and associated dock facilities via the Community Access Road." You could have heard a pin drop. Several people in the audience, who I now recognize from Cynthia's disastrous open house, let out audible gasps. One man stood up, his face red with anger. "That's my contract! You mean that's not legal?" "No, sir, it is not," I said, looking at him kindly. "It's fraud. She has sold you a legal guarantee to my private property, a right she has no authority to grant or sell." I turned my attention back to the council and to the sheriff, who was standing by the side of the room, watching the proceedings intently. "I have here," I said, picking up a thick folder, "copies of 18 such contracts. I also have evidence suggesting that Ms. Bradshaw was fully aware that she did not have this access when she wrote and executed these legally binding documents. That is not a civil dispute. That is a criminal enterprise." I walked over and handed the folder to Sheriff Brody. He took it, his face grim, and began flipping through the pages. The man who had stood up was now shouting at Cynthia. "You lied to us! You took our deposit!" Others who had bought into her scam joined in. The meeting descended into chaos. Sheriff Brody didn't wait. He walked straight from the podium over to the table where Cynthia Bradshaw sat, frozen in horror. Her lawyer was trying to whisper something to her, but she wasn't listening. She was just staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Cynthia Bradshaw," Sheriff Brody said, his voice cutting through the noise, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of felony fraud by false pretense and criminal trespassing." The handcuffs clicked. The cameras flashed. The satisfying metallic sound echoed through the hall. The buyers she had cheated were shouting questions. The reporters were swarming, and her whole world was imploding on live television. And I just stood there, leaning against the podium, my arms crossed, watching the fire she had started finally consume her. It was over. The deed was in fact king. The aftermath was swift and total. Cynthia Bradshaw's arrest was the lead story. Faced with 18 counts of fraud, the testimony of all the cheated buyers, and my mountain of evidence, she took a plea deal. She got 2 years in state prison and was ordered to pay restitution to all her victims, which, of course, she couldn't. The Lakeside Meadows Development Company declared bankruptcy. The bank foreclosed on the whole project, and it sits there today, a half-finished monument to her greed, a collection of beige stucco boxes, slowly being reclaimed by weeds. Her lawsuit against me was dismissed with prejudice, and the court ordered her to pay all my legal fees. The best part, for me, was the peace. The angry phone calls stopped. The tire tracks on my road faded away. The only vehicle that goes down to the lake now is my old Ford truck. Bessie's calf, against the odds, pulled through. We named him Justice. Bessie still walks with a limp, a permanent reminder of what was at stake. But she's content, mothering her surprisingly resilient son. Sometimes, in the evening, Sarah and I take a walk down to the wall. It's an imposing thing, a scar of gray against the green landscape, but to me, it's beautiful. It's a symbol of a line that was drawn and a stand that was made. It's a $52,000 fence that bought me priceless peace of mind. They say good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes, when a good neighbor isn't an option, you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. And that is how a $52,000 wall saved my ranch and sent a fraudster to jail. If you love seeing entitled nightmares get a dose of concrete justice, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories from the ranch. Have you ever had a neighbor from hell? Tell me in the comments.